So, if we could, let's just start out with a short personal history. Let's get the story started here. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
your personal
I'm
history.
kind of jack of all trades. Along the way, I grew up in a small Midwestern town. My father was a business owner, heating and sheet metal company, and he would take us along on his jobs when we were just little tykes, and he would explain how everything works. And I had a real fascination with mechanics when I was a kid. And then when he got into motorcycles a little bit later on, I kind of got the infection and worked at a Honda shop for a number of years. And I was sent to Honda school, the youngest one to ever graduate at age 16. And seeing the different designs, taking things apart, I kind of found my love for gadgets and contraptions, so to speak, and started building them since I was real young. I had a real affinity for mechanical things. Later on, I had moved to Madison, Wisconsin, where I had met my wife, not my wife at the time, but we spent a few years together, and during that time we started working on the AR3 Recumbent. So
All right. So that was the start of the story. We're going to talk a lot more about the AR3. So you build this trike, and you thought you had something kind of interesting. You weren't quite sure how viable it might be as a commercial product, or maybe looking for some other ideas. So I guess you had occasion to head to Dayton for some sort of convention. Tell me about what that was about.
yeah, well, at the time there were the HPVA and a lot of the sort of pioneers with the recumbents were in the bike magazines, and that was real captivating to me. I read all the magazines and memorized all the names, and Dayton was where I could go and kind of rub elbows with my peers, the people that thought the way that I did. I had been working on this since about 1980, and this is the presently the one I ride now, and it's I would describe it as a three-wheel tilting trike, that leaning trike, I should say. All wheels tilt, and you kind of lean, steer it to ride it. It's kind of got a bicycle feel to it. That's the best way I could describe the
All right.
feeling
So
of it.
let's yeah. So now this is what you've built now. And we're going to get back to this part of the story, but Trey, let's go on to the next shot here. Let's start talking about this Dayton convention, because this was kind of pivotal in the creation of the AR3. So tell us about this.
Yeah, I had a number of people that were, as I was building this, I confided in some people, and a couple former bike shop owners kind of urged me to join the League of American Wheelmen at the time. And they had a convention in Dayton, and everybody was going to be there. So I kind of packed up the pickup truck and threw a couple of recumbents in the back of it, and met a lot of people there, and went to some of the very interesting things they were putting on there, the conventions, I should say, clinics that they were putting on. I met a couple people that you may be familiar with the name. Gardner Martin was one of them, and he did a real nice presentation on his I think it was called an Easy Racer at the time, and he had fully faired it and had done some racing with it. So I was really looking forward to meeting him, and a few other guys. The names escape me right now, but we're
Well,
real.
you met. You told me that you had met Nash Bar there.
Oh, Arnie Nashbar. Yeah, he had. Actually, I didn't go there to meet Arnie. I was when I was talking to somebody else at the show. They said, "Oh, you got to go over and meet this guy Arnie Nashbar." And at the time, I wasn't familiar with his distributorship. He had a big, I think a full page ad in the bike magazines at the time. Sold the accessories. Probably one of the biggest, or the biggest at the time.
Okay, and then also you told me that you had met one of the originators of the Race Across America too. That was
Yeah.
also there.
Well, it turned out to be a really big event. John Marino had been a professional baseball player and injured himself in lifting weights. And as therapy, he was riding a bicycle a lot, and he got the idea of riding across the United States and timing it, and he started the Race Across America, I believe it was called, and he did probably about a 40-minute long talk there, and he got a standing ovation at the end of it. He was very inspiring. Everybody wanted to get on their bike and race across America, but it was fun. He was one of the big main speakers there.
Okay, let's go back to that slide if we could, Lars, with so these flyers now. So the intention that you had going to Dayton was to learn some stuff, but you also wanted to show off your trike, right? So what did you do in preparation? Tell us about the flyers and what you had in mind.
Well, this is what I did to prepare if I ran into somebody there that was interested in, and it was kind of a handout sheet for people to keep. I handed out a number of these, and they described what the bike was, and we had, if we ran into the right person and they could help us market the bike, that's great. We didn't go there specifically for that reason, but we did, hope that somebody would recognize it as something pretty cool. And at the time, I just want to tell the audience that I had never even seen a recumbent trike before this. This is out of my head. This is my own design, and it basically mimics what everyone's riding now as far as the wheelbase and height, things like that, and the pedal stance, the way people ride the recumbents today. So I was pretty much out there on the leading edge of this, and especially with the steering with it. My idea was to make it ride like a bicycle, and by interacting with it where you're leaning with it, it was more of a satisfying ride. You weren't like driving it like you would with car steering. Driving a car, you were riding it like a bike. That was my idea of the steering system that I developed.
All right, we're going to take a closer look at that a little bit later. Let's go back to the shots then of we were very lucky to have discovered Jim Schmidt's blog, and Jim was also attending the same the Dayton Wheelman Convention, and got some shots of a number of things, including what he thought was really interesting, recumbents. So Huffman was there, the maker of Huffy bicycles as well. You saw that as well, didn't you, Dave?
Yeah, Horace Huffman had a display there, and Horace Huffman Jr., his father, actually started the company. But I was there. Also, one of the draws was I knew the Vector was going to be there, and that bike, I think, is what pushed me off the fence to develop my recumbent in the three-wheel configuration like that. And that was, like I say, one of the draws. And we had planned on building actually a shell for it. Was one of the development stages that we had planned on doing for it. And my bike wasn't really developed to be a racer or to compete in the speed trials or anything. It was developed to be transportation at the time, because we were going through, this is like, I feel like Rip Van Winkle waking up 40 years later. If you go back to 1980, we were having oil embargoes, and the big narrative at the time was the earth is running out of oil. We're going to run out of oil at some point, and there was a finite supply. And it's time for everybody to start thinking about windmills and solar and
human power,
human transportation, human power, and that's.
All right, let's go to the next shot here. Now we've got a couple of shots of your trike, and these you just actually seen for the first time, as well as I did here this past week, and when Jim sent these to us, which is just awesome. So tell us. This is one of the few shots of that original trike that you see there. Well, and tell us about that experience of showing that trike off there.
Yeah, you're looking at the bike in the foreground. Or the trike in the foreground, I should say, is my last prototype before I did the space frame model. The space frame was the frame was built around the seat, was part of the frame on it. And all the tubes that were connected to the seat were part of the frame. This has, if you look, this has the single spine that went all the way up the back. I call it the spine that goes all the way up to the pedals and up the back of the bike. And all the stays were hooked to that. And that was okay, but it had a little stability problem in there was a little bit of twist to the back wheel because there's no triangulation to the bottom stays to the body of it. So it was kind of had a little inherent wobble when you'd really push on the pedals. You could feel a little bit of instability there. That's what prompted me to do the space frame, which had the rear stays were splayed out from the bottom of the seat. If we're going to see that photograph.
All right, Trey, let's go ahead and go on to that next shot. So go ahead, Dave, tell us about, that's actually you, where?
You and that's me and a friend of mine, and we were just riding around. We had been on the trails. They had a number of different destination bike rides, different length rides during the weekend, and we were either going to or coming back from a bike ride. A friend of mine that went with me on the right-hand side rode the spine recumbent, and that's me on the left with the space frame type, and you can see over my shoulder that's the seat and part of the frame of the
So those are
recumbent.
the two that you brought with you, yes?
Correct, yes.
To Dayton. Very cool.
Yeah, and
All
I just
right.
about, when you showed me those, Gary, that's the first time I've seen those. I just about died. That's, you know,
Yeah, I know it
haven't seen
is
those in
incredible. Now,
years.
before we leave these shots, you can go. We can look at these again here. As I want you to share your experience with meeting all those folks that saw and rode your recumbent trikes there at this show, because this had a huge impact on what happened. So, tell me some of the reactions that you got from these people.
Well, I was pretty excited about it. I thought, you know, that was, I had, especially with the steering system, I had really hit on something special. And the people that I talked to were rather lukewarm about it. I should say there were some people that even snickered and sneered at it. You know, anything new, you get that sense sometimes. But it was a little disappointing to feel that here I had something real special, and I knew I did at the time, but it wasn't well received. Not as well received as I thought it should have, at the very least.
Right, which, I guess we would have to say that you were just a little ahead of your time with this concept, because we know how popular trikes are right now in general. Now, another indication of how far ahead of your time you were was that, to your surprise, you got picked up by a particular magazine. Tell us that story.
Yeah, well, after, it takes a long time from when you put a news press, when you send something to the news press. With a magazine, it's a 90 to 160 day lead time that they have before it gets pressed into the glossy pages of a national magazine like this. And during I believe it was the spring or summer of 1982, we had sent this, my wife had sent this to the Popular Science magazine people, and when we basically decided, there was no interest in the bike and decided we weren't going to build anymore, a couple months after that, the magazine article comes out in the What's New of the Popular Science magazine, and my reaction was, great, now you put it in the magazine. It was kind of bittersweet, a little disappointing. It was neat to see it there, and I'm happy that it's a record. It's a record
Right.
that we can go back to and see that it actually did happen. Without that magazine article, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you today, because without the credibility that I actually did this with me on the bike, no one would believe that I did this.
There's
40
very
years ago.
little documentation.
It would have been no documentation.
Yeah, and we just found those two pictures, which probably wouldn't have been enough. It's nice to see, anyways.
Yeah.
But how cool that you were in Popular Science. So, all right. So let's to get a better handle on the timeline. We really probably haven't delineated this very well. So you started working on this project like 1980, 1981. You went to Dayton. That convention was 1982. and 4th of July weekend, 1982, right? And then the popular science magazine that came out in 1983. So this is kind of the timeline. But that pretty much was the end of the story for you on the AR3 for a long, long time. So tell us what happened. Pick up the story and take us to what happened next.
Well, I had I had followed my wife down to Naples, Florida, and started a new career, new business there, and it actually really blossomed out nicely, and we did very well for the next 20 years, and we ended up buying a place up in Central Florida as our little, I'm going to call it a cottage retreat on a lake, and we thought, well, we'll retire up here someday. So when we ended up retiring, we moved up here, and I failed retirement, my wife always says.
Tell us what did you do? What were you?
Well, we were bicycling. We were bicycling, and I had a little hobby shop. I call it. It was about I think a 4,800 square foot metal building attached to another building. It's quite sizable, but I had some CNC equipment that I had to move into it. So
right now, the reason you had the shop and the equipment and such, what I'm getting at is that I want you to describe the type of work that you did when you went to Florida. What type of work were you doing before you retired?
Well, we built a couple of different things. We built up an architectural supply company. The architecture style in Naples, Florida was Mediterranean style. It's something you'd see in Italy and, along the Mediterranean. And we did a lot of trims, and I would machine them with large 3D routers out of heavy density styrofoam. And we had a machine that coated them with plastic, and we would supply the contractors in the area, and we could do nothing wrong. It really went over well. And some of that machinery I had taken with me, most of which I had to invent. There were no machines that processed foam like that at the time, so most of those machines were of my design, and I got into CNC and computer control and processing and things like that during that time.
And working on a motorcycle.
I had when things kind of went south during the 2010, they slowed down for us in 2008 when the recession started to hit, but we had a lot of commercial accounts that the bank was still loaning money for. They didn't, stop with the commercial stuff. So we went on for a couple of years after that, and we slowly kind of petered down to, I was a motorcycle, rare, like a British racing motorcycles and stuff was sort of my main thing in Japanese motorcycles. And I had I had collected them, and I had made gas tanks and body parts out of sheet aluminum. I would actually hand pound everything, and I came up with another method of making them, and it really went over well, and we sort of tailored our business into that. I had to kind of reinvent myself into that, but that's what we were doing when we came up here to Central.
And then
Florida.
you eventually decided to hang that part of your enterprise up and retire. And you were starting to tell us then that you noticed all of the bikes you were biking. Tell us what you did as you started to retire.
Well, I can never stop doing that because people keep asking me. I send stuff all over the world. Right now, we just sent something over to Germany and just all over the place. I'd be here all day if I went down that road. But we try to keep things down to a dull roar. And I started bicycling about 3 years ago with my wife as a health sort of thing, and something to do. And I noticed all these recumbents on all the trails here, and we fell in love with the Santos Cross Florida Trail, just a few miles north of us. And we were there every other day. We were riding that trail, and it's about the paved part of the trail from Santos all the way to Highway 200 is a 16-mile ride. So we'd ride it all the way to the end to the turnaround and ride it all the way back. So we got pretty good at riding, and I'd see all these recumbents on the trails. We do the Withlacoochee also, and saw even more recumbents there. And it was kind of my heart dropped a little bit, and I thought, sitting on this pogo stick isn't doing it for me. I think I'd like to ride a recumbent. So I stopped at a couple of recumbent shops and tried the bikes out and thought, yeah, I could do this. And then I purchased a used one, a little KMX, and rode it. And I got into a couple of situations where there was a guardrail next to me, and I hit a little patch of sand and just about, crashed into the guardrail. And I thought to myself, here I'm almost 70 years old. I'm not going to heal if I smash myself right now. So I started thinking to myself, boy, I remember my recumbent handled a lot better than this. I wonder.
And then your wife actually had a little input too. She thought maybe you should get back into the AR3, right?
Well, she started hanging those posters up in her office every time I'd come in there.
And so at this point, you decided to go out into your garage and get that AR3 out of there and get back to work on it so you could ride it, right?
I started making phone calls. It went into storage in Wisconsin when I moved to Florida.
You didn't have the AR3. You never brought it with you. What happened? Well, tell us what happened. Why was it in storage?
I put it in storage when I moved to Florida. We moved to an apartment, and there was no place to keep it. There was no place to ride it. So what I did the next time I went back up to Wisconsin, I took most of my stuff, put it into storage, and the recumbent was one of them. And it went into a friend of mine's father's brother. So this is where it's turned into the lost recumbent, into his shed in rural Wisconsin. And since then, he had passed away. His father had passed away, so now I have no connection to that family except for one of his older brothers that I knew, and I knew how to get in contact with. So I wrote to him, letters went unanswered, telephone calls went unanswered. My father went over there and knocked. This is all pre-COVID, just pre-COVID. And my father went over there and knocked on his door, and nobody was home, and COVID hit right after that. So that kind of put I'm going to digress once more. I came up with the Lost Recumbent series where I was going to go up there and find the recumbent rather than build it. It'd be easier just to find it and, re-engineer it again. And after that kind of petered out because of COVID, the only thing I had was those pamphlets to trace the frame geometry from.
Okay, that's going to bring us to this next section here, I think. Right. So what happens? So now you decided you want to redo the AR3. You couldn't find your old one, which would have been the ideal situation for getting it and updating it. So you did the next best thing, and that's recreate it with whatever it is you had left of the old one. And what was left of the old one were those flyers that you made from that Dayton convention, right? So, all right. So here are these flyers again, and tell us how you worked with this. What happened?
Well, I took the photographs and I scaled them. I brought them into my CAD program, my CAD drawing program, AutoCAD, and actually traced over the top of the frame of it, and then I took a known measurement, like the front wheel is 20 inches, and I took that measurement and scaled the rest of the drawing to that measurement. So I had that measurement, I did it on both drawings, and I extrapolated the size of the frame tubing, the angles of the steering on it, and wheelbase on it. And with those, I had most of the measurements that I needed to get started on a frame.
Okay, let's go on to the next one then.
And this is the redraw of the frame. This is after I pulled it off of the drawing. Now you saw the angle of that photograph was skewed a little bit, so I had to do a little bit of, this is where I took and readjusted the wheelbase on it so that I had the wheelbase correct with the rest of the scaling on the bike. I did have the measurements of the wheelbase was on the specification sheet in that drawing, so I took that and used that as extrapolated that into this right here. And then I did a number of drawings. Our first model was a spine. We were going to do a spine model on this one as well. I would take one step back to a prototype stage to make sure I got everything right before I went through all of the pipe bending and, of making the space frame. We notched the pipes and welded everything together to make this first prototype model, which is the one you saw on your opening photograph, the one I'm riding now.
We're going to take another look at it here again, Sean.
That is actually our latest space frame model, less the adjustable headrest and the seat cushion. That's got the fiberglass seat bucket in it, and that is actually our latest frame design right there, without the ancillaries, brakes, things like that on it.
And let's just pause for a second here. Just want to remind folks that as you're watching, that we're running our live chat, and if you are interested in knowing more or have some questions specifically about what Dave has created here or the history of it as we go ahead and pop those in the chat, and we'll have Dave answer your questions for you. We're about to go into some more details of the construction of this trike, so there may be some details you're interested in. So keep a close eye and pop it into the live chat if you have questions. So, okay, let's get back to the slideshow. Okay, so now what was the next part of this process?
Well, I have a number of 3D printers. This is my, I jokingly call it my Printzilla. It's a huge format 3D printer, and I printed a half-scale frame of the recumbent, and all of the mechanical pieces we extrapolated out of the drawing, and our aim was to put everything together to get all of the measurements of the pivots right. Now we're going to talk about the steering after this, and it's important that you know that the front end of this is all of the linkage on it is what makes it tilt in relationship to the body on it, and I'll kind of explain that.
Yeah, let's go on to see this mock-up then that you made from this frame, right?
So this is the plastic, the plastic prototype, I should say, and you'll see I put the linkage on the front wheels now. So as it leans, it turns, and the front wheels articulate or tilt with the lean.
Okay, now I think what we can do best here is show these short videos. Folks, we made, Dave sent me some video here of him actually showing how this model moves and tilts to give you a better idea of the tilting mechanism. And we've got some questions already that we're going to pop up. But let's take a look at this first. And Dave, don't forget to unmute yourself, and you can talk over these. Sure. These videos. So let's start with the first one to take a look at this articulation. Go ahead, Larry.
Okay, there's our 3D print. So as I explained, the front end is basically a series of levers and fulcrums. So you'll watch where everything pivots. Those tie rods control the tilt of the front wheels in relationship to the rear wheel. To change that relationship, the front wheels remain parallel. That's a very important point of this. It's actually built right into it. This front end that I'm referring to right here is how you adjust the lean angle to the wheel tilt, the front wheel tilt. That relationship between them is adjustable. So you'll be able to see that the bottom of the okay.
All right, so here we have some more questions. So you can quickly answer this one, and we're going to get to details on this later. Are you planning on selling this?
Well, there's a couple ways of looking at that. My first instinct is I'd really like to see a trike company take this on. I'm not the best engineer in the world. I'm not a bona fide engineer at all. I really seat of the pants on this thing, and I'm sure there's guys out there that could really take this thing in over the goal line, and it'd be nice, to license someone to make it, but you have to go through the first steps of it until somebody rides it or until a product becomes successful. Everybody wants to stay away from it until it becomes successful or becomes popular. So I'm looking at this of doing a small manufacturing run to get this out there and to gain popularity of it first, and I'm sure somebody will pick up on this. Anybody that wants to come down and ride this thing, I really think it's worth the trip to do that. They are like a bicycle, real nice handling, completely different, completely removed from your standard recumbent. So
okay, I think Larry is going to probably take you up on that because he needs to review this for Bent Rider when you do get one done. And as you saw before, Chris Ferguson also asked a similar question about production.
Yeah,
so we will finish up with this. We're going to revisit that a little bit more and get more details on that. All right, so let's get we'll catch up with more questions after a little bit. Let's get ready for that second video. We have a couple more videos showing more about how the trike articulates and the construction of it. So Larry, if you could do explain number 2 here. Let's take a look at that. Don't forget to unmute.
Okay, this is a real exposed part here. So if you look, when you steer it, look at the bottom of the outside wheel moves away from the frame further. And then when you look at when it turns the other way, sort of acting as an outrigger at this point. The frame and body is leaning into the corner, so all of the weight shifts, the mass shifts to the inside of it. Now you're going to see me just twist it with my hand, and you're going to see how that makes the steering react. This is basically how you lean steer it. Now you'll see the inside wheel comes closer to the center of the frame.
Don't forget to unmute yourself.
The inside of the wheel on the right comes closer to the frame now as the outer wheel gets further away from it. That gives it a lot of cornerability because you've got a real short coupled between that rear wheel. I'm just going to show it to you again. Right in there, the path between the rear wheel and the front wheel is very short coupled, and they're pointing at each other basically.
Okay, and one of the other points that you had made to me earlier in the week is how that turning front wheel lines up almost exactly with the rear wheel. So that's the bicycle part you're talking about.
Yeah, they're
right?
almost on the same path. They're almost on the same path. It's just offset just a little bit. There's no real way to get that out of there. Maybe put a little more lean into the front wheels, but then the rest of the handling doesn't work as well with it. I've tried everything, so I've pretty much got it on the sweet spot right now.
All right, so 666 wants to know what the angle of the tilt and the turning radius are. Can you answer that one?
It's adjustable, is what I can say. I never measured the angle on it. They are adjustable. The rear wheel does not tilt exactly what the front wheel tilts to. However, you can adjust them to do that, but that doesn't necessarily yield you the best steering or the best handling qualities.
All right, and another question from Ferg. So as it leans, what keeps you from flopping over just from your body weight shifting?
Well, if you're saying flopping to the inside, inertia from when you're going around the corner keeps that from doing that. If you're talking about the outside, your mass has been leaned over to the inside. That's never a problem. You don't feel that inertia like you do with a standard recumbent.
And if I've got this right, so the outside on a turn also, as you term that one wheel, then is that as an outrigger, that actually is what is stabilizing that inertia to go in that direction. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
There's very little pressure on the outside wheel when you go into the turns. Most of the pressure is on the inside and the rear wheel when you're in the turn. All right.
And Dam Runner 1, in theory, would you have to constantly center your weight in the seat? I'm sure leaning would shift you into a turn quickly.
Yes. And you want to, when you get into a high-speed turn, you want to just scoot your butt over a little bit get ready for that turn, and it almost goes around that turn hands off. You do have to exert some pressure on it. Also, when you're, this is another thing, when you're exerting that pressure on it, you're actually pushing yourself over to the inside of the corner. It actually automatically pushes you to that side. So it's not like you have to make a real big effort to do it. It just kind of automatically all happens.
Okay, Michael says that tilt would be good for some really tight turns that some trails have. So have you taken some really tight turns on it, and how does it feel going into those tight turns?
Well, I've come from a race background. I've raced motorcycles ever since I was young, motocrossed and road raced, and this thing's a thrill to ride. It's just absolutely natural feeling to steer it. It kind of does it for you, and it's real exciting. It's just an exciting ride, fun.
Yeah.
I've gone really fast around some of the corners on Santos. I'm not going to say because they have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit there, so I'm not going to say what it was, but...
All right, Petra Hoffman, doesn't the center of gravity move to the inside? I guess he means on the turn.
Yeah, it does. That's the beauty part about this. It's like a bicycle. It automatically, you know how bicycle wheels like go out to the outside of the turn, and your lean is what pulls you through the turn. It does the same thing. It's the same sensation that you get on this.
All right, Lars. Let's go ahead and Trey. Let's go ahead and see the last few picks. So we're coming back now to the current AR3 as you've built it. So bring us totally up to date here, Dave. And guys, if you still have questions about it, go ahead and keep them coming. And as we talk about this, tell us what the up to date AR3 has on it. What have you updated? What's changed? And describe what you have now.
Well, this is I call it the spine model. It isn't quite the spine. I've got a seat bolted onto it actually from my KMX. It's actually the flat frame and fork that goes to the rear wheel. And I had put a 350 watt Bafang 36 volt battery on it just to kind of help me keep momentum up the hills while I'm riding. I'm darn near 70 years old, so I think I need that every once in a while, but that just, you don't need that necessarily. In fact, I've run out of battery and pedaled it without the battery several times. It's no big deal. Other than that, it uses all conventional bicycle parts. Nothing fancy on this one. You've probably noticed the spine sticking out of the front. It is that I designed into the original one, and I'm keeping that because that is sort of a great spot for a body to bolt to. That's a good place to couple up a body mount to the front in there. Yep.
Here's a sort of related question from Thief Dragon. Will its self-centering be affected by the weight and placement of any cargo being hauled with it? I don't know if you've had the opportunity to check that out.
Well, the cargo would, that's a good question too. I would balance the cargo. You would be able to compensate for it by putting up your weight, shifting your weight off center a little bit. But I would say maybe, and I've never tried it. I'm just throwing this out there. I would try to equalize your cargo on both sides of the bike or trike.
Can you turn without tilting? Peter wants to know.
Well, you don't have to lean to turn it if that's what you're asking. It will lean automatically. So it will tilt and lean automatically. It's actually mechanically coupled together. So there's no way to just lean it going down the road without it steering also.
Okay. Alan Hoagland, leg clearance to front wheels is always good, and we talked about this when in our practice. Tell us what you went through, and is there plenty of clearance there?
Yes, there is, and there's a built-in stop system in the front end, so it actually will stop before before the wheel comes back into your lap. And the stops are adjustable, so you can get it closer or further away if you wanted to.
And then Michael says, thanks for all that info. Okay, good. I think that's all the questions for right now, guys. If you have any more, we will finish up with a few more at the end of this. We're getting close to the end. That's really nicely describing the trike. And now I think it's time maybe to have a look at what it looks like when someone's riding an AR3. And so we have a couple videos of Dave showing it off in a couple of different configurations. And the first one is kind of see how the turning looks, how the leaning and the turning and all that goes. So don't forget to unmute yourself if you want to talk over this.
Sure.
And Larry, if you want to go ahead and play figure 8.
What you'll see in this video, I still remember making this, in this next turn, I turned and I noticed I was going to run out of driveway, so I had to turn it a little bit further at the end, which I'm not I guess my point is I'm not showing off the real turning radius. I didn't have it full stop to stop on those turns. It does turn in a little bit shorter radius than that. And somebody's going to ask me what that is, and I'm going to say about roughly 14 feet. I should say 14 feet diameter, not radius.
All right, very nice.
So let's just say 7 or 8 foot radius.
Yeah, and I remember you also were talking about to me when you were designing it to make you made sure that the turn stopped before you ran into trouble with hitting your leg, and I guess you have to make sure it doesn't go too far that it kind of collapses as well, right? Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I have adjustable stops built into it. The front, you notice those, I call them control boxes that lean, that the spindle is connected to, have an opening, and that opening goes, the yoke goes through that opening, and when it leans all the way, it gets closer to that yoke. And what I did was I put a couple adjustable plates there so that you can get it lean right over so that it's as far as you can tolerate it. If you're a little wider, you want to adjust it so that it doesn't hit you. You never have to worry about the tires hitting you because the handlebars are right there, and they'll come into your hip before the tire comes back into the seat on there. And it's not like you feel like you're doing something that's unnatural or uncomfortable. It is, real easy to steer it, and you can always scoot your butt over a little bit too if you really want to get into a tight situation like that. I generally don't have a problem with that where I ride, but if you ride in a place that's quite congested or need to make some sharp turns, you can adjust those plates over so you can make even a tighter turn than what I'm showing you in the videos.
All right. And I had this up a second ago, so Joe must have seen on the specs, it looks like 12-foot turn radius.
Yeah,
that's what he said was in the specs. Does that sound about right?
Well, that's in the prototype, and this is a little bit different from, I'm sorry, not the prototype. That's in the production the former lost recumbent production model. This one's actually, I've engineered this one a little tighter. This one actually can turn a little tighter than that.
We kind of sort of answered this question, Ferg. He was on a trail with a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit and said he did something about twice that. Is that a good enough answer for that
well, it's
question?
but it's all relative to how sharp the corner is. I think your next video, Gary, will illustrate the stability.
We'll get that a little bit better.
Yeah,
all right.
And how everything handles. It's hard to describe how this rides when you...
Well, we're going to show one last video here, actually, that I think will help to... the second best thing to actually ride it yourself, which you encourage people to do, and I think that's going to be important too. Let's take a look here at Dave riding down the trail and showing a little bit longer, regular type of ride that you might do yourself, folks, if you had an AR3. So, Larry, when you're ready, let's take a look at that hands-off video.
Yeah, this is at the Santos Trail. What I'm trying to illustrate here is the stability. When I'm pedaling, it's not bobbing back and forth. You see when I shift my weight around on it, it immediately reacts like a bicycle would.
All right, so there you see the whole tilting mechanism and lean steer in action, which is pretty darn amazing. So, all right, let's bring it to a close if we can, Dave. We've already kind of touched from some of the questions on this about what the future of this is, and basically they revolve around John Yang's question: where can I buy this? What's going to happen? So tell us what, let's be more specific as you can. What do you want people to do in terms of learning about this? What are your immediate plans for commercial products, if any, and what does the future hold?
Well, really, I'd like to get enough people to try these out and get sort of a movement going where people are experiencing these bikes, whether it be dropping one off at bike shops and having people, take them out rentals for the day, or just demoing them if a bike shop wants to, purchase one or whatever, and give them a, heck of a discount on it. Market them through the bike shops if they're interested. My intention wasn't to go out and manufacture these bikes. However, I do have the capabilities to do it. We do a number of projects at the shop. And I think my first step would be to make a frame kit. If you have a standard recumbent, all of your parts will fit from your standard recumbent to convert it to this. And it'd be a real simple changeover, your chain gear, chain drive system, wheels, the spindle front wheels. They take a 14 millimeter axle. I think it's getting them out there, and we are going to start out offering that frame kit. And if you go to the website and just go there often, because we change it almost daily as we're developing this, you'll get all the latest information and the latest videos. I have a
All
video.
right, and we're gonna, of course, we're gonna have the website listed again in the description. Mark Harris, a frame kit would be a great progression in its design, a great way to recycle an older design recumbent tadpole trike. What do you think about that?
My thoughts too. That is our first thought. Is anybody that wants to convert to this is a good step, in that direction. If you have a regular recumbent. I mentioned the axles are 14 millimeter. I'm using 15 millimeter hubs on mine. You want to check your diameter of your axle, make sure it's not a 1/2 inch. We can machine those front boxes out for 1/2 inch axles. In fact, this prototype recumbent had the 1/2 inch axles on it. So that's something you just want to be cognizant of if you plan on using your other recumbent.
Okay. All right, I think we're going to bring it to a close right there, folks. As I mentioned, we will have all of Dave's pertinent contact information in the description below, his email and his website and such. And I hope if you have further questions or are interested, and if you're a bike shop owner and are interested in talking to him, you will at some point get in touch and move this project along. So back to Dave one more time. I would like to thank you so much for spending the time to work with us, to come on the program and share all this really interesting information about the AR3. And any final thoughts, Dave, before we let you go?
Gary, thanks for having me. I've been watching your show for quite some time. I'm really appreciative of you looking up those other photographs, and it helps give credence to my design. This is a 40-year-old design. We're going to try to kick this baby off maybe 40 years late, but I think we got a shot at it with guys like you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
You are so welcome, pal. Nice working with you, and we'll have you back on again sometime, and we'll talk about what's going on with the AR3 and the latest versions, and maybe with a fairing or something like that. So, Dave, thanks again.
I got some really nice stuff for you, and the lost recumbent. I'll give you the latest on what's happening with that. So,
all right, yeah, if you find it, let us know right away.
Oh yeah, you'll be the first to know.
Thanks a lot, pal.
Thanks again, Gary.
All right.
Thanks.
So that was Dave Ashenbrener, folks. That was fun. All right, guys. Let's move on to our guest segments. First of all, we're going to start out with an update from a previous show. If you might recall that we had Dave Ashenbrener on a couple of shows back talking about the lost recumbent. And the tilting trike that he developed in the 80s, kind of lost the design and the trike, and then came back and now is redeveloped it and has actually gone into limited production with it. So he wanted to share this update with you, showing you a little bit more detail about how it works, and he's ready to go on it. So he's also on live chat right now. So if you have a question he's on there as the other e-bike guy, so you'll see him on chat on YouTube here with that. So feel free to ask him questions about this. And with that, watch the video from Dave. All right, with us today once again is my pal Dave Ashenbrener. Dave, how are you today?
Gary, it's a pleasure to be on again. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Dave, if you would, why don't you give us a quick summary of what the AR3 is all about?
Well, it's my tilting three-wheel tilting trike that I invented in the early 80s and had developed it, but there wasn't a market. We're redeveloping it, made a few changes on it, and reintroducing it to the recumbent market. I think the market's ready for it. We've completed the first production prototype, I call it. It actually is a production bike. This is a build log that you're going to see with parts that came in off the back of the semi, all the specialty bent parts. And these have been assembled and put together. And those are the machine parts that came in. We've built jigs so that the frame was assembled properly. These are the frames all welded together, ready to go. This is the rear stay jig, and this is the yoke jig that we made. This is our welder going at it. This is the all jigged up, pulled off the jig, and welded, ready for the next step. There's your integrity of the welds shot. Little lathe work going on all the parts, some of the parts. This is the bottom bearing cup. The seat mold was made by machining a piece of foam, medium density foam, and we used it for a vacuum former mold, which is on the vacuum former there. This is the sheet off the vacuum former, cut, trimmed, and this is pre-seat. That's after the seat has been put on there. This is a clamshell mold used to mold the rubber. This also to mold the rubber seat parts. It's like a waffle iron. You fill it up with the rubber and it reacts inside of it. And that's the finished piece. This is a neat little thing I made for this. I thought to have a comfortable grip would be a very important thing. So we made it from clay from my hand, and then we 3D scanned it and we 3D printed it after that. All of these parts were prototyped with a 3D printer, including the logo. That's a shelf I'm illustrating. Two things. One is the support for the upper backrest and the shelf below it for the electronics. This is an e-bike version. And this is right after I got done wiring it up. Well, I had the opportunity to show off the AR3 in its finished format, and with no further ado.
It's a center pivot steer. You'll see the caster on it forces the steering. When you lean the frame of the bike, it forces the steering to lean. The steering is activated by basically leaning and using the handlebars at the same time. It gives a feeling of a bicycle, almost. There's adjustable brackets down here I call bump brackets, and what happens is as the bracket comes closer to the yoke, it's a stop. They're adjustable stops. And what you'll see here is you can adjust it real tight so that the tire almost comes in to the frame or to the seat here. Or if you're a little wider or that's uncomfortable for you to steer, you'll never have to worry about the tire hitting you. Your handlebar will come in to your leg first. If you want to adjust this so it doesn't turn as far, you would loosen these two screws and bring this bump stop up a little bit closer. The brakes are tied together with a T. When you hit one handle or the other, both brakes equally brake with the same pressure. The front chain ring is adjustable by loosening 4 bolts underneath here and sliding this whole assembly up or down the boom. The steering is unique on this. I call it active steering. You have to participate with your body and your arms to steer and maneuver this around the corners. The harder you lean, the easier it is to turn, and the sharper corner you can go around. But when you're going at speed, you're going around a corner, as in any vehicle, bicycle, two-wheel bicycle, motorcycle, or car, you're feeding it only a little bit of steering. So you're not going to get this lean effect in a real long, sweeping, fast turn. The sharper the corner, the more the wheels will lean and assist you going around the corners. You see the yoke is coupled to the main frame with a huge 2-inch sealed ball bearing right here. This is a bushing at the top. I'll describe how the steering works. The lean of the frame is coupled to the yoke. The frame is coupled to the yoke with these tie rods, which are anchored at the frame. They're also adjustable to give wheels more or less lean in a corner. The seat has a hard shell that's attached to the seat frame. This is part of the actual frame right here. It has an adjustable, not a headrest, this is a backrest. And what this does is your spine conforms, instead of being laid straight back on a flat seat and cranking your neck to look forward over your knees. This curves your spine gradually and is adjustable to your liking. We're pretty proud of these grips. They've been designed ergonomically like you would find in a jet fighter plane, with a thumb rest and finger indents. So you don't have to grip onto your handle grip. It's very comfortable. It includes a wrist rest. If you should loosen up your grip on it, you can rest your wrist on this.
This is a question I get asked probably 50 times a day. Because it has the center pivot, is there any bump steer to this? And there's absolutely none. So many things have to happen at once for that wheel to come back toward you, that the momentum that you have plus the weight on the frame will not allow that yoke to turn as you go over a bump. Yeah, I have the rare opportunity to be standing from the outside looking in, and it's a different way of looking at this, and it really gives me an advantage to design something without having to stay in the box, so to speak.
Now, Dave, you know, we've seen what you've done with this, but I'm guessing this wasn't all on your own. Did you have anyone else involved with helping you on this project?
Yeah, I learned a long time ago to surround yourself with smarter people than you. And that's what I've done. I've got some really dedicated employees that have been with me for a long time. My wife, Richard Harvey Jr., I mentioned him in all my videos. He came to work for us when he was still in his teens, I believe. And most recently, Jonathan Ryan Ball, who is our welder and great fabricator. He's got his own fabrication business also. And I use him as much as I can when I can get a hold of him. Just a great guy.
All right, Dave. So let's finish up talking about the plans here for the immediate future.
I have 2 of them sold. We have enough to build 12 additional bikes. Well, it would be 10 then, minus those 2. And we're going to visit some dealers and do some demo rides. You can go to kazebikes.com, Kaze bikes plural.com, and you'll get all the latest information there.
All right, Dave. That sounds great. So we look forward to seeing what happens to the AR3. I'm sure it's going to be a great success. Really interesting trike. We wish you all the best, and thanks for coming on the Laid Back Bike Report one more time, Dave.
Once again, Gary, I really appreciate this, and I can't wait to see the look on your face when you ride one of these.
I can't wait either. As soon as I can get down there, buddy. We'll see you soon.
We'll set you up. Thanks, Gary.